So now, as that scene is underway in London, not all Commonwealth countries are celebrating the Queen's 70th anniversary. For more on this, we are joined by Genelle Aldred. She is an author and a communications consultant, and we reached her in London. Hello, Genelle.
Hello, Arthur. How are you?
Well, I'm glad to have this conversation with you today because there is two sides to this, really. How is the Jubilee being received in some other countries with historic links to England, particularly, for example, in the Caribbean?
So it's been a bit of a difficult time for the royal family in countries like the Caribbean. My parents are from Jamaica, both of them, and it's been well documented on the past couple of royal trips. The welcome hasn't been as warm. With the Queen, she's 96, 70 years on the throne. A lot's changed in the time since she's been there, and I think there are a lot of Commonwealth countries who are now really wrestling with the history that they have with the royal family and the future that they want for themselves.
So in the way that it is currently being celebrated by so many in London, in the UK in general, what's the contrast picture that you're seeing?
Well, of course, there are always crowds at these events and they will turn up and they will enjoy the bank holiday. I think even in this country, there is a growing kind of voice that is wondering, what will happen with the royal family, what's going on with them. But I think when it comes to the Commonwealth and in some of those countries like Barbados, who are now no longer have the Queen as their head of state, and other countries who are beginning that journey, I think the contrast is, I think people like the Queen. I think it's not they dislike her or anything like that, but I just think people are ready to move forward to a new future, like the Prime Minister of Jamaica said.
A lot of people have been, and even we referenced Prince Charles as the future king. Is there a sentiment that the monarchy will continue so that there will, in fact, be a future king?
I think it will continue with Prince Charles. We won't ever see, well, unlikely with him, we'll see him for 70 years on the throne because he's, around in and around that age. And so he won't have a platinum, and it's highly unlikely that Prince William will. And I think in the next 10 to 15 years, it will be interesting to see what shape the royal family does take. Nearly every other institution in the West is done by consent. Policing, governments, it's all done in a more democratic way. The royal family is kind of one of the last institutions that isn't done by consent. And what will that look like in the next 10 to 15 years?
Wondering, too, in terms of the contrast or the difference in interest in this Platinum Jubilee and the way it's being celebrated, what role the conversations that have emerged following the departure of Prince Harry and Meghan Markle from the royal family, what role that has played surrounding allegations of racism, and whether or not that really plays into whether or not people are celebrating the Platinum Jubilee?
I think that whole row, and also more recently the row with Prince Andrew and the settlement figure with Virginia Giuffre, all of those things have really cast a big shadow over the royal family and over their role and over their future. Something like paying someone a reported £12 million settlement fee. Well, that is something that people in this day and age, with the Me Too movement and all of those things, people feel very strongly that that is not okay. And who's paying for this? Will our tax money go towards this? The whole racism and all of those things, that didn't just play badly here. It played badly all around the world. And I'm sure in the Commonwealth countries where there are mainly black and brown people, I'm sure a lot of people were wondering, what does this mean for them? What does this say about the royal family and how they see them as a Commonwealth? We're all meant to be one big family, but in those moments, those questions have never really been answered. And although things do tend to go quiet with all the pomp and pageantry of a Jubilee celebration, those things are still festering on in the background, and I think festering on in more and more minds as time goes by.
From an outside position, me not being in London right now, not seeing all of the celebrations in person, kind of wondering whether or not it is being seen as relevant within London, because you do see these images of the thousands of people in these crowds. Is this Platinum Jubilee marking a shift in relevancy with the monarchy?
Well, I can tell you where I live in North London, there's hardly any flags. That's definitely something that's going on in central London in a really big way. And there will be street parties and all of those things, but it's not something that's happening everywhere. It's not like every street is celebrating this Jubilee as it would have been, 10, 20, 50 years ago. That's not really happening. And I think a lot of those numbers in central London we made up by tourists and people who have travelled from outside of London to come and see. So it's not that no one's celebrating, but what I think is probably more worrying maybe to the royal family and the people that live in that bubble is that growing numbers of people are no longer celebrating it in the same way that they would have done. And that just puts a bit of a change and a shift. And I think people now, we're more independent. Do we really want to have a royal family reigning over us? I think there's so many people asking that question now.
Thank you so much for this conversation, the context. We appreciate it.
Thank you.
That is Genelle Aldred. She is an author and communications consultant. Thank you.